Hey, welcome back. I mentioned today that we talk a little bit about government, and I have credentials. I was lived in Washington D.C. Until I was 24. Then I drove a tour bus for 45 years there. All kinds of things I can tell you about government bureaucracy. When I went from the Capitol to the White House, which is only 1 block, 1 mile, uh, they said I went through 31 police agencies. I counted up about 20. It's hard after that. So, as you know, the government used to take our liberties and make life miserable for us 1 inch at a time. But since the Bidens has got in there, they're now doing it a yard at a time, and the consequences are rough. I mean, we, when we go into a grocery store and buy our groceries, we have to almost it's so expensive. We almost have to get a Brinks truck to get us home. So how do we get from where our founding fathers wanted us to where we are today? We're just a little basics go into. Congress passes the laws. Okay, good, and they can also levy taxes and declare war. But the president is the head of the executive administration. We have um, Congress, the executive, and the Supreme Court interprets laws. And in the early days, of course, he would have to have a secretary. Okay, now the secretaries, you didn't have phones and internet and not even telegraph. So the secretaries would have to be located in Washington, D.C. with the president, where he could just shout and get them to come into his office. And it's continued that way, even though nowadays it's really not necessary to have all this government bureaucracy. Now, George Washington's selected area of Washington, it was originally called the Federal City for a couple of reasons. One was because the Potomac River made it accessible to the ocean. The water's actually brackish there, 30 miles south here in the Chesapeake Bay. But he located the government far enough south so it encouraged the southern states to pay the war debts after the American Revolution. They had paid their war debts, but you paid by where the battles were at, and they were just when that many battles fought down in the deep south. Okay, so now as it goes on, you add more government agencies, more and more agencies, and they're all located in Washington, D.C. So it's become a cottage industry or an industry in its own. The tour guides books would tell you the government is the number one industry in Washington, D.C. After that, it becomes sightseeing, which I was involved in. So it keeps growing and growing and growing. And then people in that area that came up for soft jobs really don't know much about anything else than Washington, D.C. and bureaucracy. And as we got to 435 representatives, congressmen, and 100 senators. We don't add any more now. You just reproportion them as you add more populace in a certain state. But it just keeps on going. And now with so many laws being passed, many laws don't go through Congress anymore. Just the Secretary of, say, Agriculture or the EPA, just they're called regulations. But basically, you have to obey them. If you don't, you're going to go to the slammer. And these people in Washington, D.C., they're in a bubble. They don't know what's going on outside the Beltway. So my thing I'm getting involved in, why should one little part be privy to all the money the federal government spends in Washington, D.C.? So I'm thinking we should decentralize our government. We don't need everybody in Washington, D.C. We're not with the internet and telephones and telegraphs and things like that. And like some of the ones I would start with would be the agriculture department. Now, the agriculture department, people in Washington, D.C., they don't know the difference between a cow and a chicken. So I would suggest that you would put the secretary and the staff and the probably 5,000 people. Actually, it's more than 10,000 make up agriculture. That was 20 years ago. But put them out in the heartlands, maybe in Iowa, Kansas, any place where people grow our food and our meat. And let them go into, in the mornings, employees of the agriculture department, into a Dairy Queen or a McDonald's, and see farmers and ranchers sitting there staring at the wall because it's been a bad summer and they're about to lose a year's worth of work. They're already in debt. Then on top of that, they have to deal with more government regulations. Big corporations, they're farmers, I guess, but they can afford high-priced lawyers. They rub elbows with senators so they can kind of go with the flow and make something of it. Another department I would like to see be taken out of Washington, D.C. would be the Department of Interior. Put them out there where people go camping, not jogging, camping and fishing. Bureau of Reformation, a lot of those comes underneath them. I think law enforcement, CIA, and stuff like that probably should stay in Washington, D.C., with the exception of their field offices. But bureaucracy, its number one purpose in life is to rebreed and to create more bureaucracy. And they're making life miserable for us. They want to control us. It's not necessary. And I think if we could start breaking this government down, and D.C. Government doesn't, the residents of D.C. don't appreciate what they have. They vote constantly with the Democrats, which don't have our best interests at heart. There's many government agencies that could be brought out there. Department of Transportation would probably be a good thing to bring out. The railroads and things of this nature, and get it out in the other states where real people live with real issues and with real solutions. I think that's enough on tonight. Remember, in Washington, D.C., we have the best and brightest that money can bribe. Cowboy Ron saying good night and happy trails.